Hey everyone, in this video I wanted to talk about how to maintain your car and make it last for as long as you possibly can. Obviously, that all depends on the person, how you treat the car, things like that. And then, if you buy a used car, it just kind of depends on the previous owner. But I'm going to discuss some things that in general will make your car last as long as possible, and it kind of is a universal thing, but I'm going to try and keep it particularly to the Gen 3 Hemis and the platform, whether it be LX, LC, LD, etc. So, first thing will be, it's a very neglected thing that I see, and it's very important because I've seen it on even other makes and models. But again, on Gen 3 Hemis, and this part is the PCV valve. On my car, it's right here. It's this little, you really can't see it that well, but it's that little black piece right there. There you go. That little black plastic piece that screws in the manifold. Now, that is, even though it's such a small part and it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, I'll tell you why. And that's because over time, those get gummed up and they get clogged. That valve has a spring and a pintle in it, and basically it allows it under whether the engine is idling or accelerating. It allows it to either um, allow air to suck or blow out of it, depending upon if you have vacuum or not on it. So that's basically what allows the PCV system to work, and that needs to work. It needs to allow blow by to come out of that. Otherwise, if it gets clogged up, you can blow seals. In the best case scenario, you might hurt your valve cover seal. Worst case scenario, and I've seen this and worked on it, rear main seals, and that's not a fun job. Rear main seal, you got to take pretty much the transmission off the car to get to, or you have to really go deep in there for it, and it is not a fun job. The seal itself isn't that bad. It's just getting to it that's the hard part, and the labor is what kills you on cars nowadays. So I encourage anyone, even if it's not a Dodge, try to get your PCV replaced every 3 years or so. Or if it's fairly new, you can take some brake clean, take it out, and spray out all the gunk, and make sure it rattles, and dry it off, and then put it back on. It's a very overlooked part, and honestly, it's caused some people a lot of grief. So I recommend doing that, especially before getting a tune for me, because you really need to make sure your car is in good health before you start adding performance parts. So next thing will be fluids, and I know that seems very obvious, but you have to realize that that's all you can really do aside from taking things off the car and pulling them apart and rebuilding them. And not many people want to do that, and I don't blame them. So by fluids, I mean power steering fluid, your coolant slash antifreeze. Engine oil should be a given. If you're not changing engine oil often, then you really don't deserve a car. Transmission fluid, differential fluid. If you have a all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, you've got a transfer case. You have to change that fluid as well. So you really need to be on top of that, because that obviously prolongs the life of the vehicle. And especially if you're buying a used car, you really should change the fluids regardless, unless you know it was changed and they can prove that. It's usually the first thing I do when I get a car. Um, Pretty much that's seems obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people don't do that, especially a transmission. I mean, guys, do you really want to spend 3 to 5 grand on a transmission rebuild, or do you want to pay 300 or so bucks to get a trans service? Pick one. And plus, these at least the nag ones, you can go 30 to 60,000 miles. You know, I do mine every 30,000 because I beat on the car. But it's still been solid. But you can go up to 60 if you want to because they use ATF plus 4, which is synthetic fluid. But anyways, the point is change your fluids at the recommended time. If you don't know, change them anyways. Doesn't hurt anything to put new fluid in there. If a part does go bad, that means it was already bad from the start, and the fluid may or may not have helped. But good fluid is always a good thing. Next thing would be something again that's obvious, but it is gas. Please use the best possible gas you can get. Make sure it says top tier so you know that it's the best gas. Don't go to Podump BFE gas station in Hicksville, USA, and think that that's good enough gas, especially if you're going to log the car. Holy crap. Don't do that. You can very easily pop a ringland, and your engine's not going to, be having a good time. So please put in the best gas. There's a lot of good stations, but try to stick to the name brand ones. Um, I've been using Valero, and that works pretty well. There's a lot of good gas stations out there. Just make sure it's top tier, and just use the best quality gas you can get. If you don't have 93 where you're at, use 91 or 92, whatever you have. Just make sure it's good quality gas. And the last thing will be, actually, I'm sorry, I have two more things. Allowing the car to warm up. This is something I don't see very often, but do not beat on your car until it is warmed up. I don't even let my car get beyond like 2,500 RPMs until it's warmed up. And I usually wait till it's around 180 degrees on the oil temp, not coolant temp, oil temp. Wait for oil temp to be up. Don't go off coolant. Um, that's usually a good place to see where you can know that the car is warmed up. Um, and yeah, try not to get the RPMs up too high unless it's an emergency, but try not to do that until the car is warmed up. The majority of the wear and tear on your engine is when it is cool. So try not to beat on it until it is warmed up. That is very crucial. And the last thing will be kind of a quote unquote Gen 3 Hemi problem, and that is not letting it idle for long periods of time. There are people that still debate whether the fact that the cam sits so high up that it doesn't get it sufficient oil from the crank when it's on, sitting there idling. Um, I think there is some truth in that. However, though, one thing that has been proven to be true is that getting a high flow oil pump, if you are not an SRT car, meaning if you're not a 6.1, 6.4, or a Hellcat. So basically, the 5.7 guys. That doesn't mean you have to get one, but you need to know or need to check your oil pressure. Make sure it's sufficient at idle. Idle, when it's warmed up, should be around 20 to 30 psi. If you start getting lower, then that's not good because it's not getting sufficient oil up to where it needs to be. The cam, the valve train, and that's very important. The engine can get hotter potentially, and that does somewhat play into the lifter slash camshaft failures that they have. So if you're 5.7, that is a worthwhile thing to do, whether you get the SRT one or the Melling high flow oil pump. I think the Melling is $100. It could be more now. I'm not 100% sure. It's been a while. Anyways, if you're an SRT, like I said, 6164, the Hellcat, it's not as big of a deal. But obviously, in general, you shouldn't let your car idle for long periods of time. I'm talking like above 30 minutes. One, you're wasting gas. Two, it's just you might have sufficient oil to get to all the parts, but there's just no reason. Your engine's just sitting there getting really hot. Especially if you have to drag strip and you got to inch up, waiting for your turn in line. Try to minimize how long you keep the engine on for, because obviously it's going to creep up and up and up in temperature, and then eventually your IAT is going to get pretty hot too. So it's just a good idea in general to not let the engine idle for long periods of time. So those are some of the maintenance stuff that I have used and have helped my car to last as long as possible. Right now, it's got a little over 151,000 miles on the clock, and it's still running good, as far as I know. Praise the Lord. But in general, these will help your car to live as long as possible. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments section. Take care.